So Mike, you finished AC Odyssey at the weekend. I have been playing and really enjoying it. We're going to compare it this week to Assassin's Creed Origins, which came out last year. These two games, very different departures to what we know and love of old Assassin's Creed games. Definitely feels like Odyssey is building on what Origins started.
Yeah.
So do you think, let's first of all kick off with the gameplay.
Yeah, so Origins and Odyssey are these, definitely the biggest games in the series. They're a drastic departure from Syndicate in that the combat's more deliberate. It's more focused on loot and progression.
Right.
I will say that in terms of that, Odyssey is a little bit too much for me. It is super bloated. I like the idea of the progression. I like getting legendary sets. I like killing these cultists to get the Spartan War Hero set or the Athenian War Hero set or Agamemnon's Greaves, etc. But I do think Origins was in many ways, but I guess we'll start with the progression, was much more focused. I feel like despite the games being developed at the same time, I think Odyssey does kind of emphasize maybe too much of that bloat that I kind of thought they were getting a little too close with Origins. But I do like that, the games are they're not pure RPGs, but they are based more around progression, so you can explore wherever you want in the world essentially right away, but that's not guaranteeing that you'll survive in every area. And I like that idea that it's much more open-ended than the rest of the series.
I like in Odyssey how different areas of the map are very clearly gated for what level you should be. And I also think that when I was playing Origins, I found myself getting locked out of quests because I was too underleveled and then having to do menial side tasks a whole lot more. Whereas in Odyssey, I feel like I'm leveling up at a good pace. And also I prefer the way that in Odyssey they've been doing the RPG skill unlocks, is that you can respec at any time. Whereas in Origins, it's so difficult because both the games have such similar names. In Origins, you kind of just picked skills and you were forced to sort of run with them. But saying that, in Odyssey, it lets you respec, but it doesn't let you save specific loadouts. So there was some specific boss fights that I was doing that I had been speccing as an assassin, as a silent hunter. And then I was doing this boss fight and I was like, well, I can't use any of these skills and they're completely pointless, so I'm gonna have to respec, but I have to remember what I was specced as earlier, and it just seems like there needs to be a few quality of life adjustments, but I feel like it's a definite improvement on Origins.
Yeah, and then if you want to get more into the combat outside the progression, I think I like Origins more looking back on it because of how it still kind of balances that old Assassin's Creed feel. The games were never realistic at all. You're punching the Pope at the end of Assassin's Creed 2. They were still sort of rooted in physics for the most part, and I think Origins more so, Odyssey, you're a full-on demigod. You are warping to your spear once you throw it to someone like a watchtower away. You are doing a ground pound. There's falling damage at first, but then when you get high enough level, there's no falling damage. You can never die from falling. And that's fine because they're painting you to be this demigod, and it's more of a superhero game. I liked Origins because it did feel more grounded. You felt like you were a human. You were this Magi, this Egyptian policeman that was kind of helping out or forming the assassins slowly, little by little. But I liked that I still felt kind of weak in this world. And I know the point of Odyssey is to be this overpowered demigod toward the end, but I liked Origins because I still felt like this assassin.
But I did feel that also that stealth is a thing that neither game has really nailed yet. Because and you have been working on a feature about this, old Assassin's Creed games totally focused on the stealth, and you felt like an assassin slipping through crowds and killing people. Whereas in this one, I can hit assassinate on someone and it won't kill him.
Yeah.
Eat my blade!
And it's super annoying, and I feel that if I accidentally get spotted, there's less leniency on, being able to slip back into stealth, and everything just completely disintegrates around me. I don't know, I think I prefer, weirdly, old Assassin's Creed games for that.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of abandoned what the series used to have in terms of stealth, but I still think because of the way I felt so vulnerable in Origins, it did feel like I was more pushed towards stealth, even though the combat still drove me toward being a warrior in the end.
And they both have naval combat. I think I prefer, well, I don't know, because I go through two minds for it, where I don't go out of my way to do the naval combat stuff. It's just there, but while I'm doing it, it's kind of fun.
I actually think Odyssey has the edge because it's integral to the world. It makes
Right.
sense. It's the Aegean Sea. It's, it is an Odyssey. You have a ship. In Origins, it's this tangential thing. You're playing as Aya, who is a great character. That's like these, not flashbacks, but these side stories that are kind of, cursory, like when it comes to the whole plot. But I do think Origins, one of the large reasons I think it is the better game in general, and a better Assassin's Creed game especially, is because it doesn't have that bloat.
Right.
There's not, like, the mercenary system, I think the game Odyssey could have done without. I mean, it's Nemesis light, and that is kind of giving it too much credit. I do like the cult system. I like that was like kind of this through thread through the main plot, the side quests. Each island you go to might be connected to a different cultist.
I think that's the thing as well that ties into Cassandra and Alexios being mercenaries and not necessarily having any particular ties to anyone and just kind of flitting around and killing whoever. I mean, we've talked about this. When you're going through, you can be in a Spartan camp or an Athenian camp and you can just decide to kill everyone if you want.
Yeah.
It's never really clear who you're fighting for. I guess that's part of being a mercenary, is that you don't have to pick a side, you just go with whoever's being paid. But I feel like that's the thing that Assassin's Creed needs, is because you're always fighting for freedom, you're fighting for the assassins. And it's never really clear in Odyssey who that is.
I think the idea of being a mercenary that's playing both sides is really cool. And like, if you were actually a mercenary and not like allied to one side, but I think it clashes with some of Cassandra's dialogue that you have to see in cutscenes. Like, it'll be like she's really fighting for Sparta or cares about Sparta, but then again later on you'll kill an entire camp of Spartans. So while I do like the idea that I think Odyssey was going for, I don't think it works out all the time, and I felt, again, like that focus that Origins has in its gameplay just makes it overall less bloated and more refined game.
One of the cool things that Assassin's Creed games have always done is given you this great big historical sandbox to play around in. So in Origins we had Egypt, not ancient Egypt, as a commenter said.
Ptolemaic Egypt.
Ptolemaic Egypt, and in Odyssey we have ancient Greece. Which did you prefer? Which did you think stood out more?
I like Egypt. I think they did a lot with what could have been potentially boring, despite like how many cool you get to see the pyramids of Giza, you get to see, like go to Alexandria and see the library. There's, I think as we get farther into the Assassin's Creed series, the settings become even more important because they did lose some of those pillars, that social stealth, that being an actual assassin. So I think the setting becomes all the more important. And I know Egypt, Japan, and World War II were those three most often fan-requested settings, and then I think it was creative director of 3, Alex Hutchinson, said no, those are boring. He never really substantiated that claim. I think it was just a personal opinion. But for them to take Egypt, one of the most requested settings, and just knock it out of the park, like, I love that in the world of Origins, like, if I keep saying it feels more confident, but it feels like there's a willingness to let you find your own story rather than like just throwing these activities at you. Well, in terms of the actual world design, I like that there's the big, I think it's called the Katara Depression in the middle of the map. It's just this barren desert, and I think the only point of interest it might have one viewpoint, and it's like the center of the map, and you really ride across it, and you're not getting just barraged with like exclamation points and question marks. You come across this like old shipwreck from maybe when, like, I don't know if the Nile overflowed into that way back in the day, and it's confident enough to not even have anything there. Wow. Maybe you'll run into an animal, maybe you'll see a cactus here and there, but that's it. I could see why people might think that's a waste of space, but I think that makes that space even more meaningful. I don't think that, aside from the empty seas, I guess, which, still you hear like your crew singing, you hear Barnabas talking to you in Odyssey.
Yeah.
I don't think Odyssey had that same patience to just let you move through its world without throwing something at you.
Yeah, kind of like the fear that the player would bounce off it if it didn't have something immediately. I mean, in Odyssey's defense, I think what they did with Ancient Greece was great, and I really love what they've done, and I love the way that obviously they're basing it on the real world, but it's all these distinct little islands with their own little stories, their own little people. I really enjoyed that. When it came to Odyssey Origins, I felt so you enjoyed that empty space. I felt like it was just seeing how huge that map was, and seeing how huge the map is in Odyssey as well. It's just a lot. It's just too much, and it can feel overbearing, and maybe that's just a sign of Assassin's Creed games as they stand right now, but I don't want to call my horse and then just say, okay, follow the path to the quest marker.
Yeah.
I'll just wait here and check my phone for a minute while you do that.
Yeah, I was a camel guy. I always am. But then I do enjoy that. So I think map-wise, Odyssey is probably like double the size of Origins, but landmass-wise, that you're actually exploring on your feet is roughly the same. From what I understand, I'm sure like Digital Foundry or someone will do an actual comparison, or already has, and I just didn't do my research. But Origins, I think, again, I keep going back to the fact that it just feels more focused and refined. I feel like it made better use of its landmass more than Odyssey. Again, like I felt like we give Ubisoft shit all the time for just having like their maps are these checklists. And I enjoyed Odyssey for doing all those things. I still have like half the quests checked off out of the 70 hours I've played. But I feel like Origins, over the course of however many hours it took me to actually beat it, 45 or something, I felt like it made better use of each individual moment. And the characters in the world I liked. I remember like different farmers I was helping out, and it might have just been a fetch quest, but I kind of saw these slice of life in Ptolemaic Egypt. I just kind of felt like Origins stuck the landing a bit better.
So you mentioned the characters and the story. You prefer Origins, I take it?
Yeah, so obviously each Assassin's Creed is set during these times of upheaval. French Revolution, American Revolution, the Ptolemaic, like Rome coming into Egypt. It's always during times of great change or whatever. And I think Odyssey, the Peloponnesian War is great for an Assassin's Creed game, or just like a great time to explore, because after fighting off like Xerxes and the Persian army, Greece just turns on itself. And I like that, and it's cool how they show that the Order is the Cult of Cosmos, the Order is Origins. They're like pulling the strings behind the scenes, but I felt like Origins was actually like they focused on it because of its story. I felt like the Peloponnesian War just became an excuse to have that war system after a while, and I felt like the family Odyssey, the Star Wars-ish, Greek tragedy, I guess, of Odyssey became the real story, whereas the time period just became less meaningful to me. Whereas Origins, I don't think they could have told that story without Julius Caesar and Cleopatra coming into the picture, and like your side playing with like taking down Ptolemy and actually at one point helping Julius Caesar. That I felt like the story made better use of the historical characters than Odyssey did. Yeah,
that makes sense, but I think I prefer the story of Odyssey more because it is a more focused family-based affair, because I felt like with Origins, I mean, Bayek and Aya's story just didn't click for me, and I liked Aya as a character, but Bayek I think in my heart of hearts, I'm always kind of hoping for another Ezio. You want like you want an assassin who's wisecracky, who's funny, who's glib, and Evie and Jacob, sort of, you could tell they were going for that. It didn't really land, and I think I'm playing as Cassandra, and I love the way that she feels well-rounded, despite some inconsistencies in plot. Just by the pure nature of being a mercenary, plays both sides. But I just like the way that she feels more well-rounded, and I like the way that it's her quest to find out what happened to her family, and that's what's driving you through. Sure, I don't think all the gameplay stuff matches up and lives up to that. Yeah. But for me, it has to be a character that I can latch onto, and Bayek sadly wasn't. Yeah.
I feel like, again, in Origins, for me, the characters, I have more characters that I remember, not names necessarily, but just joking. But I do feel like Origins, I have more kind of like those side stories and those analog, emergent kind of anecdotes that I found in Egypt more than I did in Odyssey. Maybe it was because Odyssey felt so focused on pushing me into the mercenary system or the cultists that I personally wasn't investing as much, and maybe that was my fault, I'll admit. And maybe because there wasn't that bloat, I was more able to focus on the story in Origins and just kind of go at a measured pace. But I felt like it just parceled out these little stories, these slice of life things across, Ptolemaic Egypt a lot more professionally than it did in Odyssey.
You see, I don't know, because I think the side quest content in Odyssey is a lot better done. Sure, there's just the plain old fetch quests and things, but we all came in, we were all playing it at work, and we were talking about that randy old woman.
When we were younger, we would run into the moonlit forest, shed our clothes, and pleasure each other until sunrise. our howls of ecstasy would echo throughout the valleys.
By the gods, woman! I said spare me the details.
And you've got the weird romances that, sure, they're not done to the level of like a BioWare romance where you actually care about the other character, but they're funny.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, they're more memorable for sure.
I will give you that. I think Assassin's Creed Odyssey has the clear edge in like leaning into the comedy. The series has always been very dumb when you really step back and look at it. I think Origins was too self-serious sometimes, especially Bayek and Aya, as much as I love their relationship. I think Bayek was just like, he needed to chill out every once in a while.
He
I don't know.
was so stony-faced throughout the whole thing.
Speaking of Stone, I don't know if
Hey!
Origins had
Very good.
weed. You're talking about Stone, Chin. I'm talking about weed. Bayek needs to start smoking weed because he's way too uptight sometimes, or do something to relax. I don't know, but I think Odyssey embraces its tone much better than Origins. I will give you that. But overall, I think story-wise, I care more about the characters in Origins. I care more about where it was going. I think it made better use of the historical characters than Odyssey did. And overall, I like the story in Origins much better.
So, after all that discussion, I think it's pretty clear which game you prefer.
I prefer Origins overall. I love both of them. They're very fun. I think Origins is a better game.
I don't know. So I personally really prefer Odyssey because I think it takes a lighter tone. I'm more invested in the story. Sure, there's a lot of bloat, but at the same time, I am still finding myself just kind of going, okay, I'll do one more fort.
Yeah.
I'll do one more encampment. I'll do one more side quest, which I didn't have with Origins.
It is the peak Ubisoft game, and they have clearly figured out how to nail that. And I think we like the games for the same reasons,
Yeah.
but I think like my love for Origins just a little bit outshines Odyssey.
Yeah. But let us know what you guys think in the comments below, or come find us both on Twitter. I'm at Lucy James Games.
I'm MMA Hardy,
Why did you say that so weird?
because that's what people think it says. What? It's Emma Hardy. Everybody's like, oh, are you an MMA fighter? I was like, well, clearly. Don't I look like one? Sorry, I didn't realize I threw off the whole thing.
No, that's fine.
I'm Emma Hardy. We'll leave that.
And we'll see you next week for another episode of Versus.
Bye.